Welcome to a little bit of Fun in the Lab, networking with fish. Let's get a little bit geeky. So I'm doing a CPOC right now, and I thought, well, why not share with people this cool environment that I'm playing with, especially since it's kind of sort of a larger environment with lots of toys. So what I have is two Firepower 9300s, Cisco Firepower 9300s, and they each have 3 security modules in them. So Firepower 9300-1, or just Firepower 1, we'll call that the one on top. Firepower 9300-2 or Firepower 2, we'll call that the one on the bottom. My goal for this testing is to go ahead and have 50 firewalls up on the top one. And they're called multi-instance, so they are independent of each other. So 50 firewalls up on the top one, and then an active mode, and then another 50 on the other firewall, 9300, and I'll have all of those in standby mode. So ultimately, I'll have 100 firewalls, all being accessed by the same FMC, so the same Firewall Management Center, so that when I can do upgrades for FTD code and stuff like that, I can do it through the FMC. In this environment, what I actually have is I'm doing HA, as I mentioned. The actives are going to be over here. The standbys are going to be over here. In theory, the next CPOC I get is going to be doing something similar to this, but in cluster mode. So if I actually get that CPOC, I might go ahead and make another little geeky fun with you. So what I have is I actually have in the chassis managers, and so each 9300 is called a chassis manager. So it manages the chassis, has the security modules in it, and I have on each chassis, on each Firepower 9300, I have 16 FTDs firewalls in Security Module 1, 16 in Security Module 2, and 18 in Security Module 3, getting to the 50 number. And so, but let's go ahead and take a step back of what each firewall is doing. So let's just look at FTD1A and FTD1B. So the A side for me is the ones that are going to be the initially the active ones, and the B sides are the one that are over in Firepower number 2. So what I also have, geeky fun, so had to share it with you, was I have 2 traffic generators that I'm using. I'm using the Spirent Cyberflood, which is a layer 4 through 7 traffic generator. And what I'm doing is I'm doing HTTP open connections. For those of you who do CPOCs and stuff like that, it is very common to go ahead and use a traffic generator for open connections. So you open up a TCP connection, then you leave it open. We'll be leaving it open 7,200 across the 50, 144 connections on each FTD. You leave them open, and then you do whatever failover you're going to do. And then what that proves is what people who are already having an existing connection open would experience. So to make it real simple, let's just imagine you were doing a big file transfer. So if you were doing a big file transfer and the file transfer had already started, that would be stateful. So you would still be sending transactions, but of course, because of the windowing and the replays and acts and stuff like that, you would retry. So you would see what would happen to an existing session like that. I also am using the Spirent Test Center, which I also refer to as a packet blaster, and I'm doing UDP there. So I'm doing connection-oriented TCP, HTTP with the Spirent layer 4 through 7 Spirent Cyberflood, and I'm doing UDP connectionless over on the Spirent Test Center. And so what's going to happen when you're sending UDP or DNS? So when you're sending UDP and a failure happens, anything you lose, it's not like you can really hide it with a retry like with TCP. So the UDP is going to be there so that if I lose, let's say 200, so I'm going to send 100 frames per second in one direction, 100 frames per second in another. Obviously, this is not conversational. This is just UDP, 100 frames per second in this direction and 100 frames per second in that direction. And I'm doing that across all 50 firewalls, so that's 100 flows. 100 in each direction, so let's say that I lost 300 frames in one direction, so that would be 3 seconds. that would be indicative of 3 seconds of people having new TCP connections having issues. So what I'm going to do is that's firewall number 1. And so imagine that I did the exact same thing with firewall number 2. Obviously, I have different traffic generators. So now instead of my clients being 10.101.1 and 20.201.1, they're now 10.102.1 and 20.202.1. And so on and so on and so on until I get to the 50. And so this is the 50. And so what we'll be getting is on 9300-1, I'll have 50 FTDs, FTD 1A through FTD 50A. And on 9300-2, I'll have 50 FTDs, FTD 1B through FTD 50B. And so what will that look like? So it'll look like this. So this is actually chassis number 1, and you can actually see here it's like it starts with FTD 16 in security module number 1. I have 16 container instances. So I have 16 firewalls on security module number 1. So let's just go see what that actually looks like. So what's my environment look like? So just to let you know what my environment looks like is I have, just sharing the geeky goodness, I have a FMC 9600, so I'm actually running an appliance. This is my code level for right now. I will be changing the code level later on. And this is my Firepower 9300-1. It's running this version of FXOS. I'll be changing that later. And then these are all of my FTDs, and they're all running 70184. I'll be changing all of those later as well from one centralized FMC. This is the Firepower 9300-2. It's also running 10.2.10. And again, it also has 50 FTDs, and I'll be running that as well. Now, let's go ahead and jump into one of these. Let's go ahead and let's see, which one do I want to jump into? Let's just jump into, I don't know. Okay, 13. Nope, you know what? Just in case you're wondering, hey, maybe she had 13 already there. Let's jump into 14, just for grins and giggles, because I admittedly was in 13 just a second ago. So let's go to 14. And I know that the FMC actually says, so if we go to the FMC and we go to devices, the other thing you can see is that I have 100 firewalls registered. See, I have 100 firewalls registered. So here's multi-instance 1. Let's go ahead. I just said I'm going to go to 14. So let's go ahead and go to 14. And so let's come down here. So this is 14. So this is multi-instance 14. I'm actually on the CLI. This said this is primary, and this one says it's secondary. So let's go, verify what they really think. So let's go ahead and go to A and do a show failover state. And this one is indeed primary active. And if we do a show failover state, and this one also is now secondary standby ready. Now what you're seeing here is the last reason why we had a failure. I actually shut down the physical interfaces so that I could see that that monitor and everything was all set and ready for me to do an FMC upgrade test and some other stuff. Now there's something else I want to show you here. If we do a show con all, this will actually show you that we have 9 connections. And so we have my one UDP connection, which is from the Spirent Test Center, but the other ones are not necessarily like our data plane. So that's why if I do just a show con, you'll just see I have 9 supposedly total, but only 1 that I'm showing you right now. The other ones have to do with the firewall itself. Now, what I told you is that we're also going to go ahead and we're going to run this. So I have the Spirent Test Center, and that is this one right here. So I have 100 stream blocks, 100 frames going in each direction. And so if I have any loss, it would be over here in the dropped frame. This is a summary since I have 5,000. I have 50 devices. I'm sending 100 frames per second. I'm sending 5,000 frames per second. So this should be 5,000. So the receiving should be 5,000. I'm sending 5,000 back. So the receiving side should be 5,000 back. Again, that is actually 100 frames per second across all 50, and that's the UDP that you just saw. Now let's go ahead and actually start up the cyberflood. This is the layer 467 traffic generation. I'm actually running 7.2 connections. What's gonna happen is, I'm gonna go ahead and click here. What's gonna happen is that it's going to end up being 144 connections on each of the FTD instances. So 7.2 divided by 50 is 144. So that's what's going to actually end up happening on each. So when we come back over here, instead of seeing 9 here, we're going to see 144 more than that. So it should be 153 across whatever instance we do. So if we come back over here, this is going to go ahead and start. So the traffic is going to go ahead and slowly ramp up, and then it's going to go ahead and hit steady state to 7,200. Now, the way that the cyberflood is going to do this, if we come down here to subnet data, what you'll see is it's going to go ahead and just send 144. It's going to go, okay, well, I'm going to go do this client. Now I'm going to go ahead and go do this one. So you can see the 144 starting to populate until all of them are populated. All of them will be populated once we actually get up to the top here and we hit 7,200. As you see, everything is successful. So this is just the baseline of how you would set things up. Also how you would set things up typically if you're doing testing a firewall. So now we're at 7,200, and I have so I'm not opening any more connections. I'm holding these open. Again, similar to you doing a large file transfer and then doing an upgrade or a failover test. So everything's at 144. So if we go back over to this device now and we do a show con count, we have gone from 9 in use to 153 in use. And that's really pretty cool. So now here's the really other cool thing is that what I'm going to do next, and I'm going to go ahead and cut this one, but what I'm going to go ahead and do next is I'm going to go ahead and go into here, and I'm going to do things like I'm going to upgrade the FMC, I'm going to do a deploy, I'm going to upgrade the FTDs, and then see what's actually going on with the different environments. But just really wanted to share with you this thing called multi-instance. Again, this is it with active standby mode. And if I am lucky enough that my next CPOC is to do something similar to this, but in cluster mode, then I'll go ahead and make another YouTube on that one. Anyway, geeky goodness fun networking with Fish. I'm out.